Most technical operators price their work by the hour, but this creates a contradiction. As you master your craft and execute faster, billing by the hour actively punishes your competence. If a complex task takes you 2 hours to complete flawlessly, you earn a fraction of what an amateur makes fumbling through the same job over 2 days. This creates a cycle where financial success is tied to inefficiency. You close a $10,000 flat fee project and celebrate the initial cash injection. But immediately after delivery, you are trapped under weeks of unpaid revision requests, Slack pings, and scope creep that vaporizes your margin. This chart tracks operator efficiency against profit over the life cycle of a project. As your technical execution speed climbs sharply, the time spent managing client emotions and out-of-scope revisions drags out the timeline. By the end of the engagement, your effective hourly margin crashes. Every proposal that ends with a single, finite total schedules your own unemployment. It is a trap that locks operators into a cycle of digital labor that cannot scale. The root of this trap is the belief that market value is tied to a polished design portfolio or a perfectly formatted case study. Corporate entities operate on profit and loss metrics, not aesthetic preference. When a CEO reviews a vendor, they aren't looking for a design trophy. They are looking for a measurable revenue multiplier. A beautiful artifact is a liability if it doesn't plug directly into their bottom line. The shift in value occurs when you stop selling a static digital artifact, like a GitHub repository, and start selling ongoing revenue infrastructure. Divorcing your income from aesthetic output and anchoring it to financial predictability changes your status. You move from being a disposable vendor to becoming a strategic partner in their technical architecture. Securing predictable, recurring revenue requires a specific operational strategy. If a prospect asks for a quick website refresh and you immediately pitch a massive monthly retainer, the financial leap is too abrupt for their procurement process. The solution is a mandatory diagnostic phase before writing a single line of code. You sell a paid discovery audit. This acts as a low-friction entry point where you are compensated to map the wreckage of their current setup. You deliver a comprehensive technical teardown. This diagram illustrates scanning an e-commerce data pipeline, explicitly highlighting the isolated failure points and bleeding revenue nodes. You expose the depth of the systemic rot they are currently ignoring. Once they see the exact revenue they are losing every day, you present a binary choice. They can take the blueprint and attempt to fix it in-house, or they can plug into your infrastructure for a fixed monthly fee, and you will credit the initial audit fee directly toward month 1. By monetizing the diagnosis, you secure authority. You prove their current setup is incompetent, making your ongoing retainer the most logical implementation path. Once a client enters a recurring billing ecosystem, their psychology shifts. They often assume their monthly payment has purchased 24/7 access to your time and weekend availability. To protect your margins, you deploy a restricted bottleneck. Clients can load an infinite number of granular task blocks into your portal, but a mechanical gate ensures only a single task drops into the execution pipeline at any given time. The second task does not begin until the first is fully approved. This single active task queue is enforced by a service-level agreement. It explicitly dictates a strict 48-hour delivery cycle. They dictate the priorities, but the SLA dictates the velocity. If a client attempts to bypass this queue with a manufactured emergency, it triggers a priority override clause. This applies an automatic, non-negotiable financial penalty. When forced to quantify the cost of their impatience, clients prioritize their own requests more effectively. To implement these exact SLA clauses and bottleneck matrices, grab the full Syndicate Operations Standard Operating Procedure linked in the description below. Systematizing workflow constraints creates a hard limit on your bandwidth. By forcing the client to prioritize their own requests, the system prevents the accretion of unpaid work and protects your margins. The moment a massive initial invoice clears, the client enters a critical window of operational anxiety. They sit in their office, refreshing their inbox, wondering if the investment will actually pay off. You neutralize this with a rigid onboarding workflow. If you wait 3 weeks to establish communication rules, you appear difficult. If you build a gateway that forces them to agree to asynchronous-only communication immediately, you establish your authority over the process. Your intake protocol requires them to digitally sign the SLA and submit their initial briefs through constrained portal forms. The development queue remains strictly locked until these steps are completed. To solidify trust, you deploy a quick win architecture within the first 7 days. You engineer a highly visible, low-effort back-end integration that delivers tangible return on investment before the complex build even starts. Building high operational fences and delivering immediate technical validation ensures the client respects your systemic boundaries from day one. Scaling this revenue requires amputating your own ego. If you secure $30,000 in monthly retainers, but you are still personally testing API calls or writing copy, you have engineered your own prison. You deploy the chameleon agency model. This protocol relies on white-label talent and API-driven automation to invisibly fulfill the ongoing retainer work. Here is the execution stack. A client request triggers a webhook, routing raw data through a generative AI node to map the logic. The payload passes to a white-label developer executing within parameters, pushing the final asset to an automated approval gateway. Clients interact exclusively here, with 2 options: approve or request revisions via a character-limited form pinpointing exact metric failures. This eliminates subjective feedback. Treating both human labor and software tools as interchangeable API endpoints removes the founder from the daily fulfillment bottleneck. A perfectly automated delivery system introduces a new risk. Flawless, continuous execution eventually becomes a baseline expectation. When your infrastructure turns into background noise, the client may begin to lose interest in the investment. You counter this by monitoring their active data pipelines to identify the exact moment their internal human infrastructure begins to struggle under the increased volume your systems generated. You expose this bottleneck during routine review calls. You highlight the friction point you intentionally left unsolved and present a premium tier capability as the only logical survival mechanism for their overwhelmed systems. When they request chaotic, out-of-scope delts, you execute a dynamic billing pivot. You route the request into a separate financial workflow that does not consume their active retainer slot. Actively weaponizing these growth bottlenecks and monetizing every scope deviation increases the lifetime value of your existing roster without acquiring a single new client. Defending this monthly investment requires an overhaul of how you communicate value. Sending a dense report detailing closed software tickets or specific lines of code deployed is a critical error. Listing microtasks commoditizes your fee. A client's financial partner will often divide retainer cost by the number of items. When they calculate a per-task cost, they feel the investment is too high, leading to cancellation. Instead, you use weaponized reporting. You bypass technical lists and install a single-page executive summary. This explicitly anchors your agency's existence to downstream financial outcomes like net revenue added, transforming your fee into an essential utility. You secure this status with a mandatory quarterly review call. You forecast complex future technical architectures, showing the client that pausing your service means pausing their own growth. This realization allows you to secure a 12-month non-cancelable commitment extension. Unpredictable freelance operations cannot scale. By locking bespoke execution into a systemic subscription, you create an asset with the predictability required for a high multiple exit.